Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, Abby Vesoulis. She is the national politics reporter at Mother Jones, or I should say a national politics reporter at Mother Jones. I think there's a couple. Abby, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
WIC, the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children. Give us a brief history of this program.
So WIC is a nutritional program for pregnant people, breastfeeding people, infants, children under 5. And the idea is to supplement their diets with food and milk and infant formula that helps them live their healthiest lives. And it's been around, it actually just a couple days ago celebrated its 50th birthday. Nixon was the president who introduced this at a 1969 nutrition conference. And for the last 50 years, it's been a really helpful program to families on the lower end of the income scale.
I want to read a couple of quotes that you cite from Nixon, which is, it's just disturbing because you don't hear politicians talk like this anymore. And for Richard Nixon to be the voice of reason in this type of a situation is a little bit sort of just unsettling. Malnutrition is a national concern because we are a nation that cares about its people, how they feel, how they live, said Nixon. This nation cannot long continue to live with its conscience if millions of its own people are unable to get an adequate diet. He went on to say also that a child ill-fed is dulled in curiosity, lower in stamina, distracted from learning. I mean, we've obviously known this now for 50 years. The mounting cost of medical care for diet-related illness, remedial education required to overcome diet-related slowness in school, institutionalization and loss of full productive potential. All of these place a heavy economic burden on society as a whole. You said this in 69. The program started in 73, or I should say started in 72 as a pilot program and then full on in 73. I also should just add that it was his Commerce Secretary that basically decided to subsidize corn and so that we get corn syrup and cornstarch in everything that we have. And that hasn't been great for things like diet-related slowness and illness and whatnot. But be that as it may, so how many people, and give us a sense of like the trajectory of this, if you know it, over the course of these 50 years, what has been like sort of the low numbers and the high numbers in terms of folks who can get pregnant, folks who are breastfeeding, kids and infants who are eating essentially in a healthy manner because of this program? What have been the highs and the lows of those 50 years?
At first, the program was serving a couple 100,000 to 1 to 2 million, but in recent years and right now, actually, the program serves over 6 million people per month, including almost half of all infants born in the United States. Somewhere between 40% and 50% of babies born in the US rely on WIC. But if this program is not given the additional $1 billion that it needs to serve a growing number of people, then as many as 2 million children especially will be kicked off the program before September.
And so how does it, like, I mean, so people must cycle through this like by design, right? I mean, because you're not pregnant for, more than 9 or 10 months. You're not breastfeeding for more than a year or 2 or 3. You're not an infant for more than a year or 2. I mean, so what is the process in which people cycle through? And when we talk about 2 million less children, let's say, participating in the program, are that as people cycle out, needy kids won't be able to cycle in, or will there be people who like get early, get kicked off the program earlier than normal? How will that work, the mechanics of it?
The way that people get connected to WIC is usually through some sort of doctor. pregnant people go in for a checkup, and if they're lower on the income scale or if their weight isn't where it should be, then a lot of times their doctors or their doctor's office will refer them to join the WIC program. And then they can sign up through the doctor's office sometimes, or through community health centers, hospitals. They've really been upping the education around WIC, and that's why we're seeing the program grow to 6 million users per month. There is a priority scale for WIC. So infants and people who are breastfeeding or pregnant, those are higher priority for the programs serving them than older children. Children as old as 5 can be eligible. But if we get to a funding crisis, like we're projected to get to in the next couple months, then when it comes time for families to reapply for their 2 or 3-year-old, those families will then be put on a waiting list. But infants and people who are breastfeeding or currently pregnant, those people are higher priority. So those people theoretically should not be kicked off. But if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, then you reapply every few months. But if you have a toddler, then you reapply about every year. So if you're currently on the program and don't need to reapply soon, you should be safe. But if you have an older kid, or you've already given birth and you need to reapply, then it would be those sorts of people who go on this wait list if Congress doesn't appropriate the extra funds.
All right, and I want to get to the sort of the appropriation aspect of this and the sort of like the series of multi-temporal layered continuing resolutions that we have right now. But in normal times, I was just reading, Em and I were just talking about this piece where there's been a shift in some of the southern states, I think it was Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, that are contemplating the idea of expansion of Medicaid. Florida and Texas still big holdouts, but I think the 11 that held out initially when Obamacare was rolled out and the expansion of Medicaid, I think we're down to like 4 or 5 or 6. When Medicaid expands, and you have a cohort of people, low-income people who now suddenly have health insurance and presumably will have the ability to see a doctor. And then having that probably earlier contact with a doctor when they are pregnant and a more consistent contact with a doctor. In normal times, would that then expand WIC, and what is the spending mechanism for that to happen?
So more interaction with the doctor would definitely increase the awareness of the program. So it would just by design encourage more people to sign up for WIC. Also, there were a couple COVID mechanism changes where appointments to get signed up used to need to be in person, but because of COVID, a lot of those have moved online. And so that's just made it easier for families to do the necessary steps to get on WIC. So those are just kind of programmatic shifts that have just made it easier and more efficient to get on WIC. It's not an automatic thing where if you go to the doctor's office just automatically signs you up, but it's just if you're giving people more opportunities to learn about something, then there's going to be more people that join it.
And how elastic is that funding? So that, in the event that there are reasons why it would be easier to sign up for WIC, or you'd have more contact with WIC, or you'd have more contact with people who could facilitate that. How does the funding expand with that? Or is it that people on the lowest priority settings, they get bumped, whereas they may have been deserving a year ago when there was only, 5 million people who had access to WIC. I'm just throwing around numbers. And now that there's, 5,500,000, they're no longer as deserving. I mean, is that the way it works? Or does the funding expand with?
Kind of both. So WIC is, unlike Medicaid, unlike SNAP, WIC is not an entitlement program. Just because you qualify for it doesn't mean you automatically get it. However, for the last 25 years, at least the last 25 years, Congress has acted like WIC is an entitlement program. Every time there's been a greater number of people that have signed up for it, Congress has said, okay, Nixon was right. Food for pregnant people, food for infants is important. Let's fund the program to meet as many people's needs as apply and are income eligible. this is the first time in 25 years where Congress hasn't appropriated that extra amount. So for the first time in those 25 years, the states who run the program might have to turn people away. And so we'll see that when it comes time to reapply, and the lower priority people, namely the toddlers, the postpartum people who have already given birth, those people are starting to see them turned away.
But isn't there a fear that these toddlers are going to see the safety net as a hammock?
Certainly. And, we have a maternal health crisis in the US, and that will probably get better if we give people less nutritious foods.
Yeah, I am a little bit hesitant to let the toddlers feel like they're going to get a free ride with stuff.
You got to start early. So bootstraps theory early on.
100%. How did the continuing resolution, all this sort of like this disaster that the Republican, sort of conference is, how is that adding to this? Is it just that like it's one of those things that's fallen through the cracks because there's no sort of like there's no one in at least the Republican caucus who cares enough about it that they're going to make sure it gets funded?
Yeah, I mean, the longer we go without an actual full year budget, the worse this problem gets, because this program has just been seen as a necessary thing for the last 25 years. States are in this limbo period where they're told to, we don't know what's going to happen yet. We don't know when or if there's ever going to be an actual appropriations bill passed. So just keep acting as if Congress will come through with this money. And in the meantime, the states are spending money that they don't have. They're spending into the future, thinking that Congress will eventually come through with this money. So the longer we get into the fiscal year without a budget, the more people they're going to have to put on wait lists, because right now they're spending money from March, from April, just thinking that Congress might come through with the money. So
and there's no way that Congress is going to backfill this hole, right? I mean, unlikely.
I don't see it happening. I mean, so the estimate that 2 million people will be kicked off WIC, that's thinking that the budget will be the same as last year. But we have Republicans, we have the House Freedom Caucus, who are pretty insistent that they want social spending programs to come in way under what they were previously. And so if they get their way with WIC, then WIC funding goes down. And instead of 2 million people getting kicked off of WIC, which is what the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities predicts, we're going to see closer to 5 million people be kicked off WIC. And the 2 million people being kicked off WIC, again, that's if we just copy paste the funding from last year. If it goes down, then we see many more people kicked off.
I wonder if they're going to issue like a statement, like something to the effect of malnutrition is a national benefit, because we're a nation that does not care about its people, how they feel or how they live. And just sort of like vague echo of Richard Nixon. Abby Vesoulis, national politics reporter at Mother Jones. Thanks so much for your time today. When will we know? I mean, it really is just, we're not going to know until, what is the deadline for this tranche of the budget?
March 1st is when they need to pass a full appropriations budget, or, they could kick the can down the road again and do another continuing resolution.
All right, Abby Vesoulis, thanks so much for your time today. We'll link to that piece at in our podcast and YouTube and description as well at majority.fm. Thanks again.